My name is Paul Yager. I'm a professor at the University of Washington in Seattle in the Department of Bioengineering. My work over the last 28 years in Seattle has involved molecular systems, and in the last 20 years focusing on the use of microfluidics and other systems for low-cost detection of disease. Microfluidics is a field that really didn't exist 20 years ago, but refers to moving small amounts of liquids around, often in microfabricated devices and more recently in paper devices. And both understanding the physics of the system as well as engineering with those systems to accomplish biology and medicine problems. I grew up in the Sputnik era, so born in '54, so like every kid who was paying attention, science was out there all the time, and I lived down the block from a public library where I sort of took up residence and found soon that the science fiction section was the most interesting part of the library. And I read every book they had and then started begging for money to buy paperbacks, and I've been reading science fiction semi-continuously ever since. So I've always been interested in what I'll call pushing the boundaries of where things were. When I got to college, I really got to exercise my love of science by doing a lot of experimental work. And I've always been interested in what would be next after what we're doing now, as sort of a guide signposts, I guess, alongside the road saying the next cool thing will be here. And science fiction has done a wonderful job over the decades of keeping its ear to the ground in terms of thinking about what sorts of changes would happen in society. And I've always found that inspiring, and as long as it's wrapped in a good story, I will read it. Reading science fiction is always, for me, a great reset point, because what it does is it pulls me out of the day-to-day context of where we are. I think if you keep your mind free of the constraints of the year and decade in which you live and can think about the universe as a place that is an evolution of ideas, it frees you up from the constraints of where you are today. Some science, I think, is done, very much incrementally, what's called normal science, whereas the really interesting science is when you jump ahead and throw away the constraints of how everybody else is doing stuff. And I think there's no better way to get your mind prepared to free the constraints than to work and live for a while in a space that has no relationship to what you're doing in your immediate environment. Science fiction reading is one very good way to do that. It means go to meetings that are outside of your field so that you're learning stuff and you're always learning new things. Hang out as much as possible with people who are outside of your training area so that you learn about things that you would not otherwise have stumbled on. And my recommendation is, to read something like Nature or Science or Scientific American when you're exposed to things you had no experience with whatsoever, because often your best ideas come from these cross-disciplinary concepts. While I am infinitely curious about things, my math skills stink. As a consequence, I need to work with people who are very mathematically facile. And I have been blessed that I was allowed to sneak into a bioengineering department where the students and postdocs typically are really good at advanced math. And that has allowed me to do simulation work that I knew was important but might not have been able to do myself. So for me, the team should include people who know something about what I know, and then as broad a team as possible, but including real engineers, which I'm not, who can do the hardcore engineering better than I'm able to.